Hi everybody, I'm John Rash. I am Assistant Professor of Film Production and Southern Studies. I'm very happy to be here as part of this SarahFest event. Wanted to introduce to everyone what SarahFest is just very briefly, just so you're aware. SarahFest has grown into a signature program of the Sarah Isom Center for Women and Gender Studies, bringing together artists, scholars, students, and the community through residencies, concerts, and cross-disciplinary collaborations. So between now and November 8th, SarahFest has in store for you a variety of programs that include speakers, film screenings, concerts, and art exhibitions, including the talk that you're at tonight. So I want to thank the folks from the Isom Center for all that they do. I want to thank the Center for the Study of Southern Culture for having the event here. We collaborate very often, and I also am very thankful to the Sarah Isom Center for working with me for events that I've planned through the center here in the Southern Punk Archive. And that brings us to our guests who are here tonight as part of SarahFest. So I'm going to introduce each of them. They are quite accomplished gentlemen, so bear with me as I go through all of their merits because it is worth knowing for context before we get into the talk. So first, let me introduce John Langford. John is the inaugural. John was the inaugural SarahFest Artist in Residence. He has returned as this year's Artist in Residence. He's a Welsh-born artist and musician. He was the original drummer for the punk band The Mekons, stands as leader in the movement to incorporate folk and country music into punk rock. Langford has released numerous recordings as a solo artist and with other bands, most notably the Waco Brothers, the Three Johns, and the Pine Valley Cosmonauts. Since moving to Chicago, Langford has been active in the music scene, nurturing label mates on Bloodshot Records. Langford is also a prolific and respected visual artist, best known for his striking portraits of country music icons. In 2015, John was the artist in residence at the Country Music Hall of Fame and the museum in Nashville, Tennessee. Nashville Radio, a book of John's artwork and writings, were published by Verse Chorus Press in 2006, to be followed in 2011 by Skull Orchard Revisited, a book and CD about his roots in South Wales. The Executioner's Last Songs, a multimedia spoken word and video performance, has been performed across the United States, Europe, and Australia. And two of his solo albums, Gold Brick and All the Fame of Lofty Deeds, have been adapted for theatrical productions since 2009. Langford also illustrated the comic strip Great Pop Things under the pseudonym Chuck Death. Since 2005, Langford has been a host of the weekly radio program The Eclectic Company on Chicago's WXTR 93.1 FM and is a regular contributor to NPR's This American Life. So welcome, John. John's going to play some songs for us here in a moment, but first I want to introduce his conspirator and collaborator, Jim Sheridan. Jim has been an active and popular printmaker since 1980, and his works collected by individuals and institutions worldwide. His art has toured with the Smithsonian, has been shown at the John F. Kennedy Center of Performing Arts, as well as multiple venues across the United States and abroad. He is also an award-winning author and lyricist. Since 1984, Jim's name has been synonymous with Nashville's Hatch Show Print, which many of you, I'm sure, have visited when you've been in Nashville. He ran the iconic letterpress, poster, and design shop for 30 years. In 1992, Jim began creating artworks from the shop's collection of hand-cut blocks, designed and carved by co-shop founder Charles Hatch's son, Will T. Hatch, and the shop staff. Sheridan's contemporary creations for the historic blocks were collected by individuals and institutions worldwide. In 2005, he returned to carving his own woodcuts, developed a new body of work that includes the artist cutting up his printed pieces and mixing and matching the patchwork imagery, resulting in quilt-like compositions like these that you see behind us and probably in the slideshow that we'll be running throughout the program. His works at Hatch was recipient of the 2013 Distinguished Artist Award for the state of Tennessee, is the American Advertising Nashville 2013 Silver Medalist, and was awarded the Kreider Prize for Creativity by the University and College Designers Association in the fall of 2014. So, welcome. So, we're going to get started with some music, and the program tonight, just so you know, John's going to play a couple tunes. It's going to be sort of like VH1 Storytellers, if you ever saw that show, right? So, music, conversation, also not super formal, so if you have questions and you would like to ask as the conversation goes, feel free to raise your hand. We won't necessarily need to wait till the end of the program for that type of dialogue. So, John, if you don't mind to kick us off, and then we'll get into some good conversation while your works play on the screen here.
All right, I just want to, first thing I'd like to say is that it's a pleasure to be here. Thanks. I was here 10 years ago, and I was with Jim working in Hatch Show Print in Nashville, and I rented a car, and I realized when I did it, I was actually driving across America, which was really exciting to me, down the Natchez Trace, in a car on my own. I don't ever go anywhere with a large group of people. My band, the Mekons, has 8 people in it, and we usually, and usually I don't drive, but going down the Natchez Trace was, I suddenly realized I'm out here on my own for the first time. It's great. So I wrote this song, and through the Country Music Hall of Fame and working with Jim, I met a guy called Norbert Putnam, who was actually Elvis Presley's bass player. And he was at the Elvis is right behind you, if anyone hasn't noticed. And he invited me down to Muscle Shoals, and I had to quickly cobble together some songs to record at Muscle Shoals at the legendary studio. We had some of the local guys playing on it. It was just a wonderful, wonderful experience for me. But I had lots of thoughts about the South and about music in the South. And coming to Oxford, Mississippi, on that trip really kind of kicked off the songwriting. So this one, I've never performed this on my own. Again, lonely me. But I'll do it. It's called Natchez Trace, and I know Teresa was out driving on the Natchez Trace, but it's a really interesting road. Probably all ridden down it. I tell people about it in Wales and they don't know what I'm talking about, but it was part of the Trail of Tears, and it was also the bit I liked best was it was created by prehistoric animals. Isn't that great? I love prehistoric animals. Anywhere you want me, in time and space, 3 hours from Nashville, crawling up the Natchez Trace. We left in numbers, there was no disgrace. Just a Cadillac man left home in the camp, out on the Natchez Trace. Stood up on an ancient mound, took my time to look around. There's 2 ways for me to go, no point in starting when you're on your own. Jackson, I'll never forget a face. I saw it lost when I paid for gas out on the Natchez Trace. Rolling to the brightly under, picking up the pace. Hand triggers and guitar pickers, rolling down the Natchez Trace. Rolling to a country town, cross the tracks to look around. There's nowhere for me to go, not a problem when you're on your own. There is no end to this, the wars of class and race. Shadows will fall and follow us all down the Natchez Trace. We left in numbers, there was no disgrace. If there's somewhere you know, where you'll never go, take the Natchez Trace. drop in there. I was lucky enough to meet Johnny Cash 3-4 times, I think, in the late 80s. I had a mate called Mark Riley, who was in a band called The Fall, very still sound brilliant punk band from Manchester. And he got obsessed with Johnny Cash, and it was a strange time because I loved Johnny Cash when I was a kid. First song I ever learned to play was Folsom Prison Blues on the guitar, because it's quite easy to play. I had no idea that Johnny Cash was country and western. I always thought I hated country and western music, but I liked Johnny Cash. It's a very strange thing. And Mark made me listen to a lot of his stuff. We were driving around singing along to it. He said, "We should make an album. Me and you should make an album." I said, "Who's going to listen to that? Me and you singing Johnny Cash songs." I said, "What we should do." And it was in the late 80s, so it was kind of after the miners' strike, which was a big political issue for us in the mid-80s. The AIDS crisis became a big thing where the government was doing very little, and there was organisations popping up like the Terence Higgins Trust in London, who were doing AIDS research and supporting people with this new disease that no one knew what it was. And we decided we should do something for that. And we went to meet Johnny Cash to ask him if we could. And we went and met him backstage at the Manchester Apollo. It was great because Johnny Cash was like further away than the back wall. And he's talking to his manager and he points at me and Mark. Suddenly Johnny Cash is walking towards us. And he's like, he's far away and he's tiny. He just keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger. Of course, he's all dressed in black. And he's walking towards us, and I see Mark, and he's going, "What's he doing? It looks like a gunfight." Mark's rubbing his hand like this. I'm doing the same thing as well, because we're sweating so much. We know we're going to have to shake Johnny Cash's hand, and the sweat dripping down our arms. We're so nervous. And he was absolutely lovely, and had a great chat. The conversation was really into us doing the album. Apparently, we had no idea. He'd been fired by his record label. He said, "I don't get on country music radio anymore." He said, "I have a one-way ticket to Branson, Missouri," which me and Mark said, "I don't know what is." The way he said it, it sounds awful. And of course, it is awful. Unfortunately, Johnny Cash's career took off again. So the 80s were a real bad time for him. One thing I realised about him was he didn't want to be irrelevant, and he felt irrelevant. And Rick Rubin produced his later albums, and it became like. I took my mum to see him once because none of my friends would go and see him. They couldn't be bothered. "Oh, Johnny Cash, we're going to see that old rubbish for us." So I took my mum, and we went backstage and gave him the artwork for the finished album, which he really got behind. And he even went on the BBC and talked about it. We had a singer from a band called the Gay Bikers on Acid on the album called Mary. His name was Mary Mary. And he sang, "Who's going to sing Boy Named Sue?" Mary Mary, obviously. So Mary Mary sings Boy Named Sue. Cash loves it, and he goes on the BBC and says, "These young people interpreted my songs. Meekans, Mary Mary from the Gay Bikers on Acid." I've done nothing in my life. I have caused Johnny Cash to say Gay Bikers on Acid on the BBC. This song's about meeting him and just realising that he was having doldrums and problems in his career. I loved American country music by this time. I was obsessed with it. And here he wasn't on the radio anymore, so I wrote this song for him. It's 1, 2, 3, forever. Time stands still. When you were young, you thought you'd never reach the crown of the hill. Now what you gonna do with your money when you're flat and full? Live for next week, live for last year. Try but you won't hurt them, you just don't know how. The man behind the curtain, he satisfies the here and now. And how you gonna plan for the future when you're laid record flumps. Live for next week. Live for last year. Live for next week. Live for last year. Take you to the building that you paid to build. They throw you out in the dumpster. They might as well have had you killed. I bet you wished you'd never seen these flatlands. They're shrinking, sinking space. Live for next week. Live for last year. Let's 1, 2, 3 forever. No one's here to stay. Here, we got you a present from the present day. You're never gonna hide from this grave, but it might hide you away. Live for next week. Live for last year. Live for next week. Live for last year. There's some pictures of Johnny Cash up there, and you might have seen them. That's why kind of Mark made me do the cover for the Johnny Cash record we made, Till Things Are Brighter. And that's when I started painting again. So I'm giving up painting to be a punk rocker.
Thanks for the songs, John. I think we bring Jim into the conversation and maybe just start with a question of, how did you all first meet?
John and I want to say thanks to the cohorts, to Teresa, to this John, to Andy over there, to Kevin and Afton, to Tady, Kalina. Thank you to you guys, the audience, and Angela Atkins and her husband, whose house I'm staying in. And it's wonderful. So if I forgot anybody, I apologize. So the question was, how did we meet? And I'll start by saying John was one of the many bands that came in. I had always a soft spot for bands because I worked as a lyric writer for a band in Europe and in the States. I know how hard the road is. I know how hard it is to make sure that you're there on time, to be responsible. Coming in the Hatch was something of a respite, so to speak.
No, it was great. And then, I loved going to Nashville. First time I went to Nashville, I was with Mark after we did that album. They rolled up the sidewalks and there were tumbleweeds blowing down little old Lower Broad. The Grand Ole Opry, the Ryman Auditorium, being boarded up. It was just like everything I loved about America had just been crushed by some great suburban, and Hatch was still there. And that was very interesting. And to explain, you've been making posters for entertainers since you were a young lad in the 1870s.
I was 20 years old in 1879. I'm going to try to project till we get the mics going. Everybody in back hear me? Thank you, ma'am. Hatch Show Print, briefly, 1879, two brothers come down from Wisconsin, vaudeville, circus, carnival, minstrel, all wood blocks carved, one sheet, which is that size right there. You carve the blocks once, you carve them well, you use them year after year, town after town. We have 2 books out. It was the early 1980s of the recession. I was introduced to the shop and I knew that it was a visceral experience and I wanted to work there. I asked what's a show poster. I walked in and there's a Patsy Cline folder sitting next to a B.B. King photo plate and a Johnny Cash order. And it was hanging, it was a mausoleum, so to speak. So
everybody credits me with bringing that shop back to life, but it took a lot of us, a lot of buddies, a lot of girlfriends, too many girlfriends. And we are owned by the Country Music Hall of Fame, so nutshell sentence, Hatch Show Print, show posters, up to World War II, carved blocks, you carved them once, you carved them well, you used them year after year, town after town. After that, the poster became more photograph oriented, a half sheet or a window card. bluegrass, string band, early rockabilly, rock bands. We did Led Zeppelin in 1971 and everything in between. And the shop was very conveniently priced. The overhead was low, and we loved for the bands to come in. Now it is a brand, so to speak. Cellini Aubrey has been the director for the last 12 years. I stayed on as master printer, and as John alluded to, I have my own career now as a printmaker, doing the woodcuts and cutting into patterns and working with John.
So what was the first project that you guys did together? Can you
I
talk?
was lucky enough to be asked to do an illustration for an exhibition at Cumbria Music Hall with Fame was doing. I'd done a bunch of album covers and had exhibitions. I was working as a visual artist by then. It was about 10 years ago, and they asked me to go down. They asked me to make a picture. The exhibit was called Bob Dylan, Johnny Cash, Bob Dylan, and the Nashville Cats. And basically, it was a kind of backhanded way of honoring the musicians in Nashville in the 60s. When Nashville became this very hip place for people to come and make records, and everyone was going to Nashville. It became the sort of center of the music world. And I was pleasantly surprised, because then they said, when can you come down? I've done the picture, you paid me. That's normally the end of the thing. I said, no, when can you come down? We'd like you to come down. Then they asked me to sing at the opening, which was an amazing experience, because I got to play with people like Robert Putnam, who I mentioned, who was Elvis's bass player, and all these great musicians, and kind of reunite with Jim a little bit. And they said, could you be the artist in residence at the Country Music Hall of Fame? And that was a great honor for me. So we embarked on a bunch of work. And then, did you get to that one?
Yeah, there it is right there.
There's that one.
That's the key artwork.
But I got to work in Hatch-Oprah. Well, my ambition was to carve a piece of wood that would end up on the shelf, that someone else could come in and then make a poster out of. I thought that would be a really good thing, you know. That's not like making, you know, things on paper. That's a solid object that's going to stand the test of time.
We've had a lot of artists want to come in. I actually didn't know he was a visiting artist. Pause that right there, John. That's the girl from the North Country, right there. I didn't know he was an honest God visiting artist, and I said, all right. And I kind of knew him. So many artists want to come in and point, and I do the work, and they get their name in the exhibition, and we stopped that about 25 years ago. So I said to Cellini, we'll know in an hour if he's going to pull his own weight. And I knew within 5 minutes. It was completely collaborative. He worked hard. He didn't look at his watch. He got right in there with me, and I so appreciated that. And so what this is, and I'm going to stand up, and this is an important piece. It's the first one we did. He brought that wood cut down. John carved that wood block. We got permission from from Dylan's manager to typeset Girl from the North Country, the really well-known Dylan Cash song.
If you go to the North Country,
That's it. Not so nasally. So this piece is hatch wood blocks in the background. We made 50 of them, I think.
Yeah.
Sold every one of them.
them as well, which was nice.
And yeah, and so and look at the borders, you know, and that's what I thought. We're on the same page with the borders. We're on the same page with the density of the artwork. John, you want to add anything to that?
I remember the typesetting. You know, you look at a lot of letterpress typesetting. It's pretty flat on, and then in my paintings, I started making the lyrics kind of bend and curl. And Jim was interested in that idea, and then but you had to. What did you actually have to do? You had to make all these kind of bendy metal wedges, and it was the most complex. I felt really awful when I asked him to do it, and he did it once. He said, "Is this good?" I went, "So it looks like a flying." I wanted it to look more like the wind, or something abstract and pop starry like that. Can you make it look like the wind? And he went back and worked with a screwdriver for another 8 hours and built this, so.
I was telling Kalina earlier, I was a printmaker. I had 9 hours of printmaking in college and got into Hatch and looked at it as a printmaker. But I did have a very good mentor named Kenneth Hinson, the old-time printer. That guy, that guy that taught you how to typeset, and he had all of these tricks. So I think that is foam core is what I used, and I just cut it. First you draw it out and then you cut it, I think that's 24 point, and we just dropped it in, and it really isn't that difficult. And then he would get a screwdriver and punch in newspaper to tighten it up. He didn't bother with furniture, he just used newspaper to tighten it up for all of you letterpress folks. But yeah, that's the first project right there.
Jim, can you talk a little bit about, the letterpress prints, I think originally had more of a utilitarian purpose, right? Like they were put up on telephone poles, they were meant to advertise a show, like if John was coming to town or something like that. But now we're moving more into a world of like fine art and collectibles. So could you just talk about that trajectory in terms of what you saw happen at the print shop over the years?
It's a good question, and that affects the price of the poster today. I am from the era, as John will say, called in the order, and he picked it up 10 days later. That era is gone. When did that end? Around 2000. So up to around 2000, 2002, it was, as I'm fond of saying, a tell you or sell you item. Justification of information left to right, top to bottom, make it bold, make it bright, big words, the Mekons, the Waco brothers. Just to get you into the concert, okay, here comes social media. I'm fond of saying the digital era where the computer is the best thing that ever happened to Hatch. Not only did it give us a niche market, every ad agency wanted Hatch to typeset design for them words because they hadn't figured out how to do the filters, how to do it to look digitally, to look letterpress. Ad agencies, if I quoted the job at 3,000, they say, no, we got 6,000. We want you guys to make it. We'll pay you. We have it. And all of those great folks helped get Hatch back to a state of buoyancy. The posters today, if you look at them, incredible staff there. Now you have committed to the ticket, you have committed to paying the ticket, you've committed your evening to the concert, whether it is the Foo Fighters or a classical band playing at Tennessee Performing Arts Center. You want the poster as a collectible, as a commemorative item. The reason I'm saying that is there's so much more room for design now because it can say the Foo Fighters in 36-point type. Who cares? It's going to look great on your wall because you don't need it to, it didn't sell you on going to the job. I hope I explained that well. Now it is a collectible, a lot more room for design. I'm from the era when it was a tell you and sell you item.
Great, thank you. And John, I wonder for you, coming into this as an artist, how did you transition into working with Jim and then some of the collaborations you've done over
Well, I was just playing music and I was doing a little bits of illustration and the cartoon strip and stuff. But I seriously gave up doing painting and fine art when I was at art college because it seemed very boring to me and punk rock seemed very exciting. So I just went with what it's going to get me out of bed in the morning to do something. When I moved to Chicago, I'd been dumped by a major label. I had no visible means of income, and I met an artist called Tommy Fitzpatrick, who you may well know from a lot of album covers by Steve Earle, but definitely Yellow Moon by the Neville Brothers. Very iconic album cover. He did. Big Irish guy, boxer, car thief, and he just saw some of my work and said, "You're born to etch, man. You should be etching." And I was like, "Oh." I said, "Well, I thought I could do that." And he made me do it. He physically bullied me into etching. And I would go to his studio and he taught me a craft, which is something I did not learn at university because I was too busy off in a van being a punk rocker. And that was a great gift, but then it informed, I wanted to paint. I really got back into the idea of painting. But the experience of printmaking on a number of levels, really influenced the way I approach painting. And I have a lot of friends who are fine artists and still do. We spend a lot of time in the studio painting really beautiful, big paintings. And they sit around all year waiting for some rich people to come around and buy them. And I thought, I'm not interested in that whatsoever. So I still utilize different forms of printmaking throughout my work. I do paintings, but the images I create, I break them down into things I can make prints out of. And this project with Jim has also been very spontaneous and fast, and I don't find it. We have more expensive pieces, you'll see things out there, but for me it's to make some kind of egalitarian sort of affordable art. Some people came to a show once, musicians like my stuff, it's all related to music. When I started painting again, and making prints, they were about music. It was particularly about country music, particularly about people like Hank Williams, Johnny Cash, Bob Wills, but in a way they were autobiographical because they were all about the music business and about how I was just, I'd just been kind of dumped out of the music business, and that was what was on my mind, was the cruel and unnecessary nature of that business. And where was I going with that? But to make imagery that musicians responded to, that they couldn't afford, seemed like a really, really bad idea. Somebody said, I love your stuff. Nah, I couldn't afford that though. I was going, I can't afford it either. I just make it. So I've worked really hard on making stuff that's affordable, and printmaking, that's what you do.
You have to remember that printing is a democratic process. It was always meant to be for the masses. That's why the crowns wanted to control the printing. All right, so what I wanted to add to what John just said was, when we met, I didn't know a lot about the English career, the Britain career, but I've learned a great deal about it. I've come to have the highest respect for this guy because not only does he go out there and play, then he will walk and sell you $100 and $200 pieces of art in between shows. Now you think, oh, that's quite unusual. It isn't unusual. Bob Wills did it, Hank Williams did it, Marty Robbins did it. Everybody sold merch in between the shows. So John has the system, and I really enjoyed, he was making some in the house in between working on whatever exhibit we were working on. $100 pieces, and he takes a square out there, and it pays for the gas, and it pays for the hotels, and everybody goes home having a John Langford piece.
The last meeting on so our drummer left a bag of t-shirts. The only merch we had for the whole European tour, he left it on the Eurostar, so we're going into Amsterdam. We couldn't get it back. We got it back in the end, but weeks and weeks later. So we had no merch for this tour, so we decided to go to one of the cheap, where can we get cheap t-shirts? Where can we get fabric pens? We spent every day, we had 8-hour drives in the van, and it made it so much better. We would just sit there drawing t-shirts, and every night we sell every single one.
Yeah.
And put the tour into kind of like not in the red, so it was a great thing. But the one thing I'd say, we're getting to the point of me and Jim working together, and we talked about that a little bit. The thing about being a musician is you naturally collaborate, and somebody asked you, Kalina, the other day, what is it about printmaking that makes it more collaborative and democratic than an artist's painting? Because you have to share the equipment. And I never thought of that. That's really great point. But I found that through, me and Jim came together through printmaking, but now we're making something that's not necessarily print-based. It's more, I don't know, it's very collaborative. And it reminds me of playing music a little bit. If somebody came in here now with a guitar, I didn't even know we could strum a few chords, we'd probably make something. It took a bit longer to get to this state with John, but it's a lot less lonely and kind of isolated and precious to be making stuff with other people. And today, with the cohort, I was standing looking at like 5 people working on these pieces. Were made in the last 2 days.
They didn't exist yesterday morning. These two behind me.
There was like 5 people working, and it's just, that's amazing. Look at this.
Like a quilt. It reminded me just like a quilting bee.
Yeah.
Jim, can you talk about that process a little bit? I know we mentioned it in your intro, but just this idea of like reusing certain pieces.
Yeah, and let's pause that one right there. I've been waiting for a piece to come up because there's a lot of nice people. I think you're just here for college credit. I'm very appreciative of you being here. But let me explain what this piece is. So John gives me the artwork. I'm already familiar with the style of his artwork. Sometimes it's black and white, sometimes it's very colorful. This skull with the guitar came in on a 16 by 20 inch sheet of paper. I knew I wanted it in the corner right away, and then beam out all of the woodcuts from that lower left-hand corner. So he gives me the artwork. I got really good now at cutting out his artwork. That's one of the toughest ones. And then I just start building out with one woodcut. You're going to see it as a diamond. That is actually a border from an 1840 quilt from the New York Times at a national quilt show. I enlarged it, carved it out of the wood blocks. There's a lot of work that goes into something like this. And then I would color them, and then he comes down and he takes it from there. He adds the words to it, adds the a lot of I don't want to call them just dots, but a lot of busy work to it. And that's the final piece there. And everyone, two things I want to say. One is, everyone says, how can you guys work together as artists? And John alluded to this. Well, musicians do it every day. They collaborate every day. Every LP, every CD, everything you want to download is a collaboration. Why can't artists do it? We're 90 days apart in age. We both have had rises and falls in our careers as artists and as musicians. Egos left at the door. I don't think we could do it if we were 40 years apart in age or 30 years apart. But we instinctively know, and we do a lot of discussion, instinctively know what the other one would want, and handing it back and forth like monks in a monastery. The other thing is, when people see this, they say, I've never seen this before. And the cohorts heard me say this yesterday. Just because you've never seen it before doesn't mean it can't be done. And I thought that also as a younger person. I thought, man, I've never seen that. I don't think I should try that. And then I started coaching myself off of that and feeling better about trying these new things, because I do come from a world of printing. As a printmaker, the rules and regulations keep it between the ditches, so to speak. But I have gratefully made a career in the creative arts, not keeping it between the ditches for the last 45 years, and John can say the same thing.
Can you talk a little bit about, Jim, I know when you and I talked earlier that you had some ideas about how your and John's lives have been in parallel in many ways. Could you all speak about that?
I'll give you the best example. I fell in love with a Dutch girl when I was 20. I call her my cartographer. We're still friends. Her daughter runs the apparel shop with my artwork. I always wanted to be a European. I love languages. I felt very comfortable. Western Hemisphere of Europe and Scandinavia. John is very comfortable as an American. When we did Girl from the North Country, that piece right there, we were interviewed and I said, yes, it's a girl from North Wales or Scotland or something. And John said, no, I thought she was from Massachusetts or something.
Minneapolis.
She's from Minneapolis.
Northern Minnesota, that's where Bob's from.
Yeah, so you get the point. I'm daydreaming to this moment about being on the north coast of the Netherlands in a little province called Friesland. And I go back all the time, and those are the girls from the North Country for me. His are from Minneapolis, so you can take that and expand upon it.
Great.
I don't want to expand it.
Are there any questions from the audience? We meant to say that.
Yeah, I thought we should,
Come on,
welcome to
somebody.
ask us anything at any point. Hi.
Hi, I want to ask a question to the audience first, which is, you know about the Mekons, the band, but who knows what the Mekon is? Does anyone know? No? Would you explain to us what the Mekon is and how it became the name of the band, please?
Well, the first Mekon single was reviewed in the NME, and it was,
Yeah.
the journalist said, it was single of the week in the NME, and I said, lousy Milky Wave name. Because Mekons was, the Mekon was an evil alien who fought terrible intergalactic imperialist battles with Dan Dare, space pilot of the future. But Dan Dare was just basically a sort of RAF Spitfire pilot from Britain, from England, who sort of donned a spacesuit, went off into space and had battles with the Mekon. So the band was called Dan Dare and the Mekons when we first started. And that was one gig, which I missed because I had something better to do that weekend. They came on stage, they were pushed on stage, all sitting on a sofa, and the sofa had spaceship written on it, which I was quite good. We never tried to do that again. But then everyone kept saying, which one's Dan Dare? So then it became the Mekons. But it was a joke because there was only one Mekon. Kind of like Margaret Thatcher, but green. Thank you, Scott.
So, I know you said that you tried to push boundaries and in the printmaking world, I feel like in the past, from what we've been learning in Kalina's class, it seems like there's been a lot of movement to converge these different insular communities in the printmaking world. What do you think was something that you experimented with that was particularly exciting to you, or do you think that was particularly revolutionary in your personal practice?
The question basically was, identify as a printmaker, I can be a printer, so going into that very traditional print shop, what did I see, what did I discover that by all rules should not be done? That's your basic question. It would be brayering the roller that you have ink, getting the ink off of the roller, brayering that directly onto the paper, cleaning the palette knives onto a piece of paper. And I have to say, I didn't tell Kalina this earlier, but I saw Howard Finster, a well-known folk artist. He died about 2002, I think, Somerville, Georgia. I saw him selling, and those of you who know Finster's work, REM cover, Talking Heads cover, Finster would draw little faces on the circles where he cleaned his brushes of his rags, and he was selling those. And I thought, I'm going to do that. So I started cleaning all of my brayers and all of the rollers, even the big ones on the Mealy, the 29-inch rollers, onto paper, and they started building these beautiful hues and tones and textures, and then dropping the palette knife. Because in Hatch, there's a lot of ink going through there. When Cellini first started, she couldn't believe we bought it by the 100 pounds. She's used to the hobby printing. A lot of ink there, and a lot of ink goes into the trash can. You can't save all of it. What sells it, though, is putting the Hatch Show Print logo on top of it. And to make sure that it's clear, I brayer heavy opaque orange, that gray orange like the Estes Trucking Company. It's the most beautiful orange yellow on the planet. A dark yellow, almost an argument for orange. Let that dry for a week or so, and then drop that dark red logo on top. And I sell 6 or 12 of those a year. I still go into Hatch one day a week and do artwork, by the way. Thanks for the question.
I would also say what Jim did, and I've seen it in loads of people's houses. You'll go around someone's house and go, oh, look at that, wow. And Jim took the old plates. You mentioned this earlier. You take the old plates and then kind of make them into something new.
to give them a contemporary context. And I know that's going to be on the cemetery stone, you know, the artwork from Hatch, but I hope that there's at least a byline that I have been carving my own blocks to get the job, and I've been carving my own blocks since there. And the pattern artwork, the quilt artwork, I've always loved textile, I've always loved quilts. When I give my own talk, I have these 3 tenets, I won't go through them, but the second one is individualization of utilitarian items. A fancy way of saying what you use, you have made. So what's your inspiration? Nature. There's no Seinfeld to watch in 650 on the Baltic Sea. You're going to watch the birds go by. You're going to watch the sun rise and fall. You're going to watch the leaves change. This is your inspiration. That's why when I have one of these art shows, and even like this one right here, someone might say, "Oh, you've been to Cuba. I can see the Cuban influence in your artwork." And I said, "No. While I've traveled extensively, I've never been to Cuba, but they have been to Cuba, and this reminds them of that artwork indigenous to that land." Next person might say, "Oh, you've been to Turkey. I just saw artwork like yours from Turkey." "Oh, you've been to West Africa. That artwork looks just like the textiles that everybody wears." "Oh, you've been to New Mexico lately." You get my point. All of these cultures, we don't even know the other one exists 1,000 years ago, have the same inspiration, and that inspiration is the balance of design found in nature. That's what I bring to my woodcuts, and those are the woodcuts that I bring to John's work there.
So what is it about this collaborations don't always last as long as what you all have created together. So I wonder, how do you all collaborate as artists in a way that's made it sustainable and last for this many years?
I would say we've just had some really nice opportunities, and people have asked us to do things, and that's the way I've always survived. I've never kind of had much success. I'll say the young artists, it's really discouraging when you put your portfolio together and you put all your slides in and write your artist statement and your CV, and you send it off to a gallery and you never hear anything. And I kind of gave up after a while. I was thinking that way. But my advice is to sort of get out there and meet people. Everything I've ever really done has come through sort of personal connections or somebody telling someone else something that's word of mouth. So we've been very lucky, and I've got this kind of, elder statesman and punk rock thing going on now. So God help me next year or the year after when there's all these journalists that want to say, "What was punk rock like 50 years ago?" I don't want to talk about it. It was horrible. I'm much happier now. But no, I mean, it's very odd. There's I don't know why. Maybe you work hard and you produce good quality. That's all I've tried to do, is work as hard as I can, do the best I can, and keep thinking of things that keep you interested, not to do stuff purely because you think it's gonna be financially viable, not to follow formulas that you think other people have followed and have found success, but just to try and find your own route. And I think with this, we've been following our noses and our instincts, and it's opened up quite a few interesting doors. And I don't know, just the act of collaborating, I think that's interesting to people, that they see us working together as a pair, making that, and that's quite odd. So, quite odd.
To add to what John just said, I'll see him tonight, might see him in the morning, but it might be 3 weeks or 3 months before we even talk again. We'll text back and forth. And that's the way it should be. When we come together, we know what we're going to do. The other thing is, to John's point, what he just said, and to me this is really important that you guys get. It's 1977. I'm probably buying beer, you know, at midnight. Another buddy, I'm gopher at a publishing company, and there's a guy named Don Schlitz that is their house writer. You don't know the name, but you know The Gambler, you know so many of his songs, I think 38 #1 songs, but he didn't have those hits yet.
No way forward. That one.
That's Don. So Don and I, it's midnight, he's working in the computer lab at Vanderbilt, and we're sort of small talking, and I said, it's a tough life out there, or whatever I said, and he said, this is what he said, yeah, but what else can we do? That's the line. That's the line. That's why John just said what he said. What else can he do? This is what he knows how to do. What else can I do? This is all I know. We will never give up. That's what you guys have to hear also. We'll never give up. It may be $1,000 piece or $5,000 piece or $100 piece that we sell. We will never give up. We'll keep going.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No rest for the musician, no rest for the artist.
No sleep till Brooklyn.
I'm sure there's more audience questions out there.
Surely you can see we don't take ourselves that seriously anymore, so don't take yourselves that seriously either and ask a question. That young lady in the back who I said I really like short hair, would you ask us a nice
I
question,
promise you
please?
a question. I think it's so interesting the way that the sort of connection between being artists and being musicians has come up, it being a sort of collaborative space. I was interested, John, in what you were saying about making your first print feeling a little bit autobiographical. I was wondering if you could both just tell us a little bit more about how being an artist, a physical or a visual artist, has changed your music and vice versa. And again, you kind of mentioned it in a few ways already, but if there's
Well, I mean, I would say I had to find a subject. I was pushed into making art again. I knew I had technical skills, which I didn't feel were like particularly appreciated or that interesting when I was at art school. I just knew I could draw. I'd drawn my whole childhood. I was a compulsive sketcher and drawer, copying photographs, useless tasks like that. I loved to do it. I just thought it was great. And so when Tony Fitzpatrick said, I'm going to give you a show, you're going to have 6 months working on etchings, I had to find something, some reason to do it, some content and some subject matter that made sense. And I turned to what my interests were and my recent experience. I think the best art is made about what's going on immediately around you, you know, things you know about, things that affect you. And certainly for me, it was the power structures of the music industry and the history of music and the kinship I felt with musicians. And I started making stuff. I made the first piece was Hank Williams' Saint Sebastian. And it was Hank Williams shot through with arrows. And I've gone off to Europe on a tour, and me and the Soundman had gone to every, all the medieval stuff's usually in the basement of the great European art museums, so we all rushed down to the basement, look at the Hieronymus Bosch and the Poricals and all the gold leaf Christian art. Christian art's pretty violent, a lot of it, actually. As I get older, I'm looking more towards, Eastern art, because they seem to have a much nicer time. If you want some beheadings, bloodletting, people shot through with arrows, it's like, get down in the medieval sections. So that I thought, well, and also there was that thing about, Cash. I sang that song about Cash, his career disappearing, coming to Nashville and seeing an era of America that I was very interested in, not there, and thinking, what's changed? Obviously, capitalism rolls through and chews up and spits out, and things change, but this was to me like, this is what's great about America, this is the stuff I love about America. So I wanted to write songs about that, and then to make art about that as well. So I started thinking of people like Hank Williams and Bob Wills signing their contracts as kind of religious paintings, like The Last Supper or something. And I would have Hank Williams sitting with ghouls and demons around him, sort of like leaning over him as he signs. There's loads of photos of, guys in the music industry signing their contract. And I've done that. I've done that with Virgin Records. I did it with A&M Records. And there's this great moment where you go from being the most exciting person in the world, who everyone loves and wants to buy you dinner. They want to get your signature on that contract. And in an instant you sign it, you become a corporate employee, and you're the most boring person in the world because you're just annoying and you just want stuff. And they hate you after that. That's my experience anyway. So that was the kind of, I thought, that's it, that's what I'm going to do. So suddenly I had this whole kind of world of imagery I could sort of sum up. So it was, to me it was autobiographical, but veiled.
I'm gonna add on to that just a tiny bit. I have had a wonderful career as a lyric writer. I'm honest about saying I could never put that extra zero on the royalty check. I wrote dozens of songs for a band out of Scandinavia. They're English lyrics, bear with me, I'm giving to art. We won 2 Scandinavian Grammys. We were signed to Capitol Records in 1986. We were given our royalty check advances, and the record never came out because they fired the A&R department. Worked with a local band. They didn't get up as early as I did. I was saying to Kalina earlier today, I'm 35 years old, and my fiscal and creative future is in the hands of guys that sleep till 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Some of them you're going to know. They were in a band called the White Animals, very, very well known. I wrote with Steve Boyd, the lead singer of the White Animals. We're still very good friends, but I thought, man, I can't do this anymore. So I just literally put down the pen and picked up the paintbrush and the brayer. Why I wanted to tell you that right after what John said is because to me it's the same thing.
Yeah.
Images as words or images on through wood blocks. They're both images on paper. And the most important thing I learned from lyric writing, remember you guys, and you're so kind to listen to this, is I'm given a structure, I'm given a melody, and I'm given a chorus and a bridge, and I have to follow that. That editing process has made me a much, much better printmaker. That discipline of having to fit whatever I wanted to say within the confines of someone else's melody. That is one of the foundations from which I can work so well with John today.
I think we are very similar in that sense that we think it comes from the same part of the brain. A lot of people will tell you the art, visual stuff's over here in this part of your brain, and music's in this part of your brain. But I know we have writers, poets, printmakers, artists here today, and I love the idea that we can tell you. That's one thing I would like to explain to you, is that you should, to mix it up is really, really great. To step into other, get out of your comfort zone and go into other areas, and you'll find suddenly the little things will open up. They'll make. I thought I couldn't do a painting when I was asked to do that show. I can't do a painting. I can't do a cat. I don't do it to a gallery show. This is ridiculous. Well, I go on stage in front of 800 people and sing songs I've written and not think twice about it. So what's the difference really? And it was the discomfort of not feeling like I could do it. But you can all do it.
Just because you haven't seen it doesn't mean it can't be done. Do I have to have you repeat it? Do we need to have it repeated after me?
Is that a tune?
No, but that's
You should write that one.
That'll be it. We'll get on that.
Have you all collaborated musically? Are there lyrics that you sing of Jim?
We sing Roger Miller songs late at night in the car.
Got a letter from, let's ask another question.
Maybe one more.
I know Afton said 7 till 7.
The question is, when are you guys going to shut up?
That's I thought John could play it
Oh, yeah.
one
You
more
wanna do
time,
some
and
songs,
then
yes.
Jill eat up, Something?
Yeah, okay.
Jim, is there a song that John has that you might like him to sing? Is that?
Let's see, it's the waltz song that Susie sang at the City Winery.
Oh, I can't sing that.
I knew you were gonna say that.
That's why Susie sang that.
Let's do, I will
Because I
let
suck
you
at
know.
drawing.
Oh, all right. That's a great song. This is a Mekon song.
Sing along.
Everybody's so in love